My fiancé told my kids, "Lucky your mom passed away." Hey everyone, I'm a 43-year-old guy, father of two amazing kids, Jack, who's 21 and just starting his senior year of college, and Sarah, my 16-year-old firecracker of a daughter who's firmly in her junior year of high school. They're my world, and I'd do anything for them. So yeah, this story is about them, me and, well, my ex-fiancée, Rachel. A little background first. My wife, Emily, passed away in a car accident 6 years ago. A drunk driver ran a red light, and just like that, she was gone. No warning, no goodbyes, only this massive void that I didn't know how to fill. Emily was my best friend, my partner, my everything. And suddenly, I was a single dad, trying to juggle grief, work, and raising two kids who were also mourning the loss of their mom. Jack was 15 at the time and Sarah was just 10, still so young. I promised myself back then I wouldn't rush into another relationship. The kids had already lost one parent, and I wasn't about to throw someone new into the mix unless I was absolutely sure. Fast forward 3 years, I met Rachel. She was funny, smart, beautiful, the kind of person who could walk into a room and light it up. We hit it off pretty quickly. She didn't have kids of her own, but she said she loved being around them, and at the time that felt like a good sign. I wasn't looking for someone to replace Emily because, let's face it, no one could. But I did miss having a partner, someone to share the ups and downs with. Rachel made me laugh again, made me feel like maybe I could have that part of my life back. We dated for 3 years before I proposed. During that time, Rachel met Jack and Sarah, and things were okay. Not great, not terrible, just okay. Jack was polite but distant, which I couldn't really blame him for. He's always been protective of Sarah and me, and I think part of him felt like Rachel was intruding on the family dynamic we'd built. Sarah, on the other hand, was a little more openly wary. She's got this sharp intuition, and I've learned to trust it over the years, but I chalked her hesitance up to typical teenage stuff. I figured they just needed time, and Rachel assured me she was willing to put in the effort to build a bond with them. Looking back now, there were definitely some red flags I ignored. Rachel would make these offhand comments about how Jack should learn to be more independent, or how Sarah was too attached to me for her age. At the time, I thought she was just trying to help, offering suggestions on how to prepare them for adulthood. But now, well, I'll get to that in a bit. Anyway, we announced our engagement a few months ago, and decided to have a small dinner with close friends and family to celebrate. It was supposed to be this joyful occasion, a chance for everyone to come together and toast to the future. But instead, it turned into one of the most awkward, gut-wrenching nights of my life. So, the engagement dinner. It was a small gathering, just close family, a few friends, and, of course, Jack and Sarah. I wanted it to feel intimate, like a warm celebration of this next chapter in my life. I'd been nervous about how the kids would handle it, especially Sarah, but they both agreed to come, which I took as a good sign. I thought maybe, just maybe, this could be a step toward everyone getting a little closer. The evening started off fine enough. We were at this nice little restaurant downtown, one of those places with candlelit tables and good wine that makes you feel fancy even if you're just eating pasta. Jack was making small talk with Rachel, Sarah was mostly quiet but polite, and I was doing my best to keep the mood light. Then dessert came, and so did the comment. I don't even know how it started. Rachel was in one of her chatty moods, telling a story about how we met. She was laughing and I was smiling along, even though I've heard her tell that story a dozen times. Then, out of nowhere, she said it. She laughed and said, "Well, honestly, it's kind of lucky Emily's out of the picture. Otherwise, I never would have had a shot with him, right?" The second the words came out of her mouth, the entire table froze. I swear it was like someone hit pause on life. The laughter died. Forks stopped clinking against plates, and all I could hear was the faint hum of the restaurant's background music. My brain couldn't even process it at first. It was just shock. Pure, unfiltered shock. Jack looked like someone had just slapped him across the face. His jaw tightened, and he shot me this look. A mix of anger and disbelief. Sarah, on the other hand, went pale. Her eyes widened, and for a second, I thought she was going to say something. But instead, she just pushed her chair back, stood up, and walked out of the restaurant without a word. I should have followed her. I should have said something to Rachel right then and there, called her out for being so unbelievably insensitive. But I didn't. I just sat there like an idiot, my mind spinning. Rachel, meanwhile, didn't even seem to realize what she'd done. She just kept talking, trying to move the conversation along like nothing had happened. I think she even made some joke about how awkward moments keep things interesting. I wanted to scream. Jack finally broke the silence. He put his fork down, leaned back in his chair, and said in this calm but icy tone, "That was completely out of line." Then he turned to me and added, "Dad, I'm going to check on Sarah," before walking out after her. And there I was, sitting across from my fiancée at what was supposed to be a celebration, feeling like the biggest failure in the world. Rachel looked at me, confused, like she had no idea why everyone was so upset. She even tried to laugh it off, saying, "What? It was just a joke. People are so sensitive these days." I didn't laugh. Couldn't. All I could think about was Sarah's face when she walked out, the way Jack had looked at me like I'd betrayed them both. And honestly, in that moment I kind of felt like I had. After the dinner, I drove Rachel home first. The car ride was awkward as hell. She kept trying to justify what she said, insisting it was a harmless joke and that my kids were just too sensitive. I stayed quiet for most of the drive, staring at the road and gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. Inside, though, I was fuming. I didn't even walk her to her door when we got to her apartment. I just mumbled a good night, waited for her to go inside, and then drove home, my mind racing. When I got home, Jack and Sarah were waiting for me in the living room. Jack was pacing, hands shoved in his pockets, while Sarah sat curled up on the couch, her face red like she'd been crying. The second I walked in, Jack went off. "Dad, what the hell was that?" he said, his voice sharp and loud enough to make Sarah flinch. "How can you just sit there and let her say something like that about Mom? About Emily?" I tried to explain. I told him I was just caught off guard, that I didn't know how to respond in the moment. But that wasn't good enough for Jack. "Caught off guard?" he repeated, his voice dripping with disbelief. "She basically said she's glad Mom's dead, and you're caught off guard? Do you even hear yourself?" I opened my mouth to defend myself, but then Sarah spoke up, barely above a whisper. "Do you even care about how we feel anymore?" She wasn't looking at me, just staring at her knees, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. And that broke me. I sat down across from them, my head in my hands, and said the only thing I could, "I'm sorry. I screwed up. I should have said something. I should have defended your mom." My voice cracked, and for a second, I thought I might cry, but I swallowed it down. "You're right, both of you. What she said was wrong, and I should have shut it down immediately." Jack stopped pacing and looked at me, his expression softening just a little. "So, what are you going to do about it?" he asked. It wasn't angry this time, just tired, like he was exhausted from having to ask the question at all. "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but I promise I'll figure it out. And whatever I decide, it'll be with you two in mind." That's when Sarah finally looked up at me, her eyes glassy and full of something I couldn't quite place. Hurt, maybe, or disappointment. She said, "She doesn't like us, Dad. She never has. She just pretends when you're around." I asked her what she meant, and that's when the floodgates opened. Sarah told me about the little comments Rachel had made over the years, mostly when I wasn't around. Things like, "Your dad spoils you too much," or "You're old enough to take care of yourself now." She said Rachel had been pushing the idea of her going to college out of state, even though Sarah had been leaning towards staying close to home. At first, Sarah thought Rachel was just being supportive of her independence, but now she wasn't so sure. Then Jack chimed in. Apparently, Rachel had been subtly encouraging him to move out ever since he turned 18. She kept saying it'd be good for me, that I needed to start my own life, he said. But now I think she just wanted me out of the way. Hearing all of this was like getting hit by a truck. I'd been so focused on trying to make Rachel feel welcomed and comfortable in our family that I hadn't even noticed how much she was undermining the bond one had with my kids. And the worst part? They'd been dealing with it on their own, probably because they didn't want to upset me or make things harder. I apologized again, over and over. I told them I'd been blind to what was happening, that I should have seen the signs. Jack just nodded, his jaw tight, while Sarah leaned back into the couch and wiped her eyes. "We just want you to be happy, Dad," she said softly. "But not with someone who doesn't respect us. Or Mom." And that was it. That was the moment I knew what I had to do. No matter how much I cared about Rachel, no matter how much I wanted to make things work, my kids came first. They always had, and I'd been fooling myself to think otherwise. After that conversation with Jack and Sarah, I spent a couple of sleepless nights just thinking. I replayed everything Rachel had ever said or done in my head, trying to figure out how I'd missed it all. And the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. She wasn't the person I thought she was. Or maybe she was, and I just didn't want to see it. Either way, I knew I couldn't move forward with her. Not after everything my kids had told me. Not after that comment. So, a few days later, I asked Rachel to come over so we could talk. She walked in all smiles, like nothing was wrong, and immediately started talking about wedding plans. Venues, flowers, guest lists. I let her talk for a minute while I tried to figure out how to start. Finally, I just blurted it out. "Rachel, we need to talk about what happened at the dinner." Her smile faltered, and she let out this little sigh, like she was annoyed. "Oh, come on, are we still on that? I already told you it was just a joke. People need to lighten up." I shook my head. "It wasn't just a joke, Rachel. What you said hurt Jack and Sarah. It disrespected Emily, and it crossed a line. A big one." She rolled her eyes at that. Actually rolled her eyes. "I wasn't disrespecting Emily. I was just being honest. If she were still here, we wouldn't be together. That's not disrespectful. It's just the truth." I stared at her, dumbfounded. "Do you even hear yourself right now? You're talking about the mother of my kids. My late wife. The woman I loved. And you think it's okay to joke about her being gone." That's when she started to get defensive. She crossed her arms and said, "Well, I'm sorry if your kids can't handle a little honesty. But let's be real, they've never liked me anyway. They've been trying to sabotage our relationship from the start." That hit a nerve. "No, Rachel," I said, my voice firm. "They didn't sabotage anything. This is about you. About what you said and the way you've treated them. They're my kids and they're my priority. Always." She scoffed. "Your priority? What about me? Do you have any idea how hard it's been for me? Trying to fit into this family? Trying to be patient while they act like I'm some kind of intruder? I've done everything I can to make this work, and you're just going to throw it all away because of one stupid comment." At that point, I realized we weren't even having the same conversation. She wasn't getting it. She wasn't even trying to. "This isn't about one comment," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's about everything. The way you've been pushing Jack to move out, the way you've been trying to convince Sarah to go to college far away. It's about the fact that you don't respect the bond one have with my kids. And honestly, I don't think you ever really wanted to be part of this family. Not the way it is." Her face hardened, and she snapped, "Maybe I didn't realize how much baggage I was signing up for. Taking care of someone else's kids isn't exactly easy, you know?" And that was it. That was the moment I knew there was no coming back from this. I stood up and said, "Then maybe this isn't the right relationship for you. Or for me." She looked stunned for a second, then angry. "So that's it? You're just going to end things? After everything we've been through?" "I don't see another option," I said, my voice quieter now. "I can't be with someone who doesn't respect my kids. Who doesn't respect my family." She tried to argue, to backpedal, but I wasn't budging. I told her it was over, that she needed to pack up her things and leave. She stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. And for a moment, I just sat there in the silence, feeling this weird mix of relief and regret. Not regret for ending things, but regret that it had ever gotten to this point. Of course, that wasn't the end of it. A few days later, Rachel started posting all this cryptic stuff on social media. Quotes about second chances, and not letting go of the good things in life. Then she sent me a long message, pouring her heart out and begging me to reconsider. She said she could change, that she'd try harder to get along with Jack and Sarah, but it all felt hollow, like she still didn't really understand what she'd done wrong. I didn't respond. I'd already made my decision, and I wasn't going to drag things out any longer than they needed to be. After Rachel and I split, there was this weird adjustment period. The house felt quieter, emptier, but not necessarily in a bad way. It was more like I could breathe again. I spent the first few weeks just focusing on Jack and Sarah, trying to rebuild the trust I'd let slip during my relationship with Rachel. We started doing small things as a family again, movie nights, Saturday morning breakfasts, even just sitting around the kitchen table talking about our days. Felt good, like we were getting back to what mattered. Jack graduated college a few months later, and I couldn't have been prouder. He got a job offer right out of school and moved into his own apartment nearby, which was bittersweet. I mean, I knew it was time for him to spread his wings, but after everything that had happened, I wasn't quite ready to let go. Still, we see each other all the time, and he makes a point to call or swing by for dinner at least once a week. He's turned into this thoughtful, responsible young man, and every time I look at him, I see a little bit of Emily in his smile. It's a reminder of everything we built together, and it makes me proud in a way I can't even put into words. Sarah, on the other hand, is still at home, and I'm holding on to every moment of it while I can. She's 17 now, and we've gotten so much closer this past year. She's fiercely independent but still confides in me about her plans, her dreams, even the silly, day-to-day high school drama. She's been looking at colleges, and while she's keeping her options open, she's leaning towards staying in-state. She told me she doesn't want to be too far from home, and I'd be lying if I said that didn't tug at my heart. She's growing up so fast, but she'll always be my little girl. As for me, well, I've done a lot of reflecting this past year. Breaking up with Rachel forced me to take a hard look at myself and why I got into that relationship in the first place. If I'm being honest, I think a big part of it was loneliness. Losing Emily left this giant hole in my life, and I thought maybe being with Rachel would help fill it. She wasn't a bad person, not entirely, but I realize now that our relationship was more about me trying to recreate a sense of family than it was about real love. I wanted something that felt whole again, but the truth is, you can't force that. You can't replace what's gone. Emily, she's still a part of me. She always will be. I've come to terms with the fact that the space she left in my heart isn't something that can be filled by anyone else. And that's okay. I don't feel bitter or stuck anymore, just at peace with it. I've stopped trying to chase some picture-perfect idea of what my life is supposed to look like and started focusing on what I already have. My kids, my memories, and the life we've built together. For now, I'm not looking to date. I'm not saying I never will, but it's not a priority. I'm just trying to be the best dad I can be, to be present for Jack and Sarah and to enjoy this time with them while I still have it. Watching them grow into these incredible people has been the most rewarding thing in my life, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Do I get lonely sometimes? Sure. There are nights when the house feels too quiet, when I miss having someone to share the little things with. A laugh over a dumb TV show, a late-night conversation about nothing in particular. But I've learned that being alone doesn't have to mean being unhappy. I've got my kids, my friends, and my memories of Emily, and for now, that's more than enough.